Appalachia is home to many old communities that no longer exist. Communities with names like Yates, Beelick, Viper, Princess, Ripshin, and Cutshin. Small communities that often grew up around a crossroads and were named after a geographical feature or perhaps a local character. These little communities frequently consisted of nothing more than a small general store, a one-room schoolhouse, and maybe an old tin-roofed country church. One such community was the Orion Community, located in Ashe County, North Carolina. Few people even remember its name today. It doesn't appear on any maps. Yet at one time, it was a thriving little place with a store, a one-room schoolhouse, and a Methodist church. In today's episode of Backwind Stories, we visit that little white country church and talk with the amazing Edith Calvert Crutcher, whose family donated the land and helped build it around the turn of the 20th century. Please enjoy.
As far as I know, the Orion Community got its name from the constellation Orion, the stars, because of the altitude, the mountains. That would have been certainly in the late 1700s. It started in a very simple way, I think, about a dozen people who felt they needed a place to worship, particularly my great-grandmother, Sally Bower Calvert, who led the charge and gave the land and had the church built. The congregation was small, but they were enthusiastic. It was a new gathering place for the concerns of the community, and that was very important then. Well, the wood was cut here from the chestnut trees before the blight came, of course. So we don't have wormy chestnut, which is our contemporary view of chestnut. And often people will come in and look and say, well, you said this was chestnut. Yes, it just doesn't have any wormholes in it. The pews were made in North Wilkesboro. And my great-uncle, Lynch Dent, went there to pick them up and brought them back up the mountain in a wagon, of course. And I think that it took him, they said, 3 days to make that trip from here to North Wilkesboro. The banister around in the pulpit came from a church in Jefferson when they were building a new church. I was told by my father that the banister was from 1840. Speaking from childhood, it was sometimes fearful because some of the ministers, their tenets was to first put the fear of heaven into the congregation. We had all done bad things, and we were going to be punished for it. And in the child's thinking, sometimes it stopped there, and it made one afraid. You were supposed to come to the altar and kneel and stay there until you felt you were absolved of your sins. That was one approach. And I think, fortunately, we had ministers with a more loving approach. Well, of course, we used the Cokesbury hymnal when we finally could have hymnals. But at first, there were the things that people remembered. Shall we gather at the river, unclouded day, sweet hour of prayer. I remember her saying that the very soul of this place were in these hymns, in this hymnal. And I thought about a soul a lot when I was a child because it was so abstract, and I looked around to see what corner it might be hiding in. And I remember taking a hymnal and sitting on the front steps, the stone steps there, and opening it and reading the hymns and thinking if I closed it fast, I could catch a soul in it. It seemed perfectly reasonable at the time. when my Aunt Mary Lou would get tired playing the organ, because of course you had to, this was with the pressure of your feet and your legs for hours on end. And the backboard of the organ there can be removed. Inside, you can take your hands, or if you have little feet, and help the organist by pressing on it. And that was my job as a child when Aunt Mary got tired. Communion then, early on, was of course grape juice, no alcohol, and bread that someone had baked, until we were able to have a communion service with the little cups. Why, it was just a simple glass, actually, a glass goblet, as I recall. For revival, now that was another very big event in this church. We were expected to arrive as families early in the evening and stay as long as the Spirit moved the minister, which might be a couple or 3 hours. Other people participated in the revival, not just the minister. One of my earliest memories is of Grandmother Jenny standing there at the altar, leading us in prayer. There was no doubt in our young minds that someone was listening and action would be taken. Baptisms were at what we called then the Big Creek, which is the end of the hill. The creeks met there and made quite a pond, and that's where we went for baptisms. I remember the feeling that it was an event, of course, and that it made Grandmother happy. She liked to see us all baptized. But that again was a big social event, and people would come from other churches, you see, to a baptism. The general feeling was you did not drink alcohol, you did not dance, and for some reason or other you did not play cards. A show of too much joy was during services was frowned upon, you know. It used to have regular services in the early 70s when the Methodist charges felt that their rural congregations were just not enough to support what they needed to make it an active part of their church. And when I knew that they were going to deaccession their rural churches, and this was one of them, I didn't feel this church was ready to just be let go. My aunts and the family still came to church here. I did purchase the church from the charge. And after the deaths of my aunts, when there was really not enough even family, we leased it to small break-off congregations for a while. And now I feel that we've come full circle.
Recently, Mrs. Crutcher arranged the sale of the Orion Church to a local Ashe County family who are dedicated to preserving its unique historical character. This family intends to open the church as a non-denominational house of prayer that will also host various services, along with speakers and musical events throughout the year. We wish them the best of luck.